Welcome to the new Frostblades Trickster Guide, step-by-step leveling guide. If you look through the notes, anything new or added will be noted in here as new 3.21. And I've also deleted some notes that are no longer relevant. We're starting off here. I'm just going to go through step by step, but basically how you use the POE is for the tree, the skills, and the items. There will be tabs that are associated with each other. Just make sure you have all of the same tabs set up. The items in the item section are just going to be aspirational items for that level. So they might be, realistically, you're not going to aim exactly for that. It's just like the general idea of what kind of stats you're looking for overall. And then make sure you have your configuration and level set up appropriately for whatever it might be. So if you typically kill Brutus around level 10, you'll want to set your tree here to level 10 and make sure you have the proper amount of skill points, which should be around 10, and then you'll get all of that set up. So this is the first thing. Here is the Brutus special, I call it, because the hardest part of the game earlier on was killing Brutus. It was very difficult. You kind of start coming into more power later on, and you get like Blade Trap to help against Merveil in the first couple of bosses, because Frostblades doesn't have the single target necessary yet until a little bit later. But early on, Brutus is very difficult, and now I have, for quicker Brutus kill, get a big two-handed sword, preferably a long sword, and 2 iron rings, and then buy Puncture. If you have 3 or more transmutation orbs, you can also get Efficacy, which will require a green-blue link on top of the previous ones. And basically the way Puncture works is it's a guaranteed bleed when you hit, and it has a base 8-second bleed. So Efficacy will scale the damage over time and the bleed duration. With this example setup I have, which does have a 20% quality longsword, which isn't likely, so it'll be a little bit lower damage, but you could also get like a magic longsword with physical damage on it. So that is a possibility as well, because it's a level 8 base. You need either a sword, claw, dagger, or bow to use Puncture. You can technically use this with a claw if you do get a good physical claw, but the base damage on the longsword is the highest that you're going to get that's able to use Puncture. Basically, you just smack Brutus once, run around while the bleed does its work, occasionally get in pot shots with Frostblades, and you no longer are going to have mana problems with Brutus, and it's going to be like a third of the time to kill him. I've been practicing with different ways to kill Brutus to kind of make it easier, and this is the best way. And the best part is Frostblades with a two-handed sword is also very good. You're just going to be one-shotting more things as compared to using a claw from level 1. So moving on to the next stuff, the only major changes are we're grabbing Life Raker right away, and also beelining down towards multi-shot again. So basically we're taking Charisma a little bit later here. As far as updated notes, I just added that you now get access to faster attacks at level 8, which you can link to Whirling Blades as soon as you get it. The other thing to note is, and I haven't put it in the guide because we don't know anything, but it's possible that the best third link for Frostblades is either going to be faster attacks, Prismatic Burst, probably not momentum for single target, but possibly for leveling once we start using Blade Trap for a single target. So since we don't know the numbers on Prismatic Burst or momentum yet, I think that it's kind of hard to say. You can also just use added lightning to get more base damage to go with the relatively high damage effectiveness of Frostblades. So you could just do Frostblades, added cold, added lightning. I've done that and had some success with that as well. Very nice, especially with a fast weapon. But that is kind of the setup. There hasn't been too many changes other than that outside of the pathing. So moving on to where we start getting to more changes. This is when we start getting to the nice juicy stuff, and it'll be even a little bit more following this. But now we have multi-shot with attack mastery at level 24, as well as we still have charisma with the reservation mastery and Life Raker. So this is going to be our setup. You can also path through the strength rather than up through here. The only reason I path this way is because it allows us to take Life Raker earlier, and this is just a lot of attack speed for Whirling Blades and general for clear. Like, you're stopping just to smack packs. Like, you might Frost Blink over a pack and then turn around and smack it with your Frostblades. That's going to be much quicker and much easier with Life Raker, considering it gives a total of 22% attack speed. And then we're also additionally going to be getting another 12%. So we're getting 36% attack speed really, really early on with our additional strike. It's going to make the early game feel a lot smoother, and then we'll get our damage from this reservation mastery as well. And at this point, we will be level 24, so I'll make sure to update that. Once again, Onslaught isn't going to be available. However, what we might end up using is like just momentum. I'll have to see how momentum works. I think it'll probably be momentum, but if not, right around this point, we can simply, on our 4th link, add Trinity, because we are going to be able to use Trinity soon, and I've gone through that update, and I'll go through a little bit in the notes, but we are going to be taking Wrath very quickly. So basically what we do here is want to make sure we're no longer leveling Precision or Clarity past level 1. I will add that to the notes. I don't currently have that in yet, but we would just take, you know, whatever. We could just put added lightning in for this stage as well at this point. The basic setup is really nice, and then as far as this, there's nothing really new. We're still going to be using Blade Trap for single target with added cold and swift assembly if possible. You know, you can kind of improvise here. You don't need to necessarily buy 2 added cold, since we'll be dropping Blade Trap. You can do kind of a swap, like a gem swap if you'd like, or you can just switch around like which gems you're running. Doesn't matter too much. So yeah, we get that set up, and that's this is the part where the biggest change and everything happens. This is a completely new leveling route, as far as we still are just going for a lot of attack speed. You can either really early on pick up the accuracy mastery if you'd like, and this is where you kind of have to make a choice as whether or not to go to precise technique. I don't think it's necessary anymore. I do think you have the damage, so I think it's better to start moving up this way now, and you can start getting your claw stuff and your life and leech mastery, which is going to be really nice early on, and of course the new mind drinker reservation mastery. But yeah, this is right around the point you get your first ascendancy, and the biggest changes here are going to be our gem link setup. So we're now going to be running Trinity, and now we are running Hatred. So Precision can stay at level 1 now for basically forever. It's just there to give us the extra little bit of accuracy and crit chance and the reservation mastery type thing. So Precision doesn't need to be leveled up at all anymore. And then we are now using Wrath. So what that'll do, so we go over here to Frostblades, and we now have lightning damage that's significantly, you want the max lightning damage to be at least like 40-50% higher than the minimum cold damage, and that will allow you to consistently proc Trinity. So very important there. And what we'll start doing is looking for like lightning damage on jewelry if we can get it, gloves, anything like that. If you can pick up extra lightning damage, that's pretty nice. If not, not a big deal. Wrath will give you enough to overcome the added cold and the flat damage from Frostblades for now. Later on, you'll need a little bit more help because Wrath will start falling off in comparison to like when we get Ice Bite. But for now, that's the case. And for new stuff here, yeah, I just have you want to pick Wrath over Hatred as your aura. This gives you access to Shock and early access to Trinity, which is very strong. You can also use Elemental Weakness until you get your mark on hit setup. Yeah, there we have Elemental Weakness, and that'll give us a nice boost of damage, like a 15% more damage multiplier. So get that saved in here. Other than that, we have in Act 4, you'll want some extra transmutes so you can start crafting your flat damage, and you get access to your lightning damage crafts after killing Piety, and you'll use that instead of your cold damage crafts from Act 4. So that's, yeah, pretty much the setup that will allow you to continue using Trinity. Moving on to the next stage of the game, I have level 34 through 55 here. And we start getting a little bit different setup. So during this point, you'll want to get the Mark Mastery. So basically, precise techniques kind of off the table. That's 4 points, which works out nicely. So let's go ahead and move those right to the Mark Mastery, and then we can get our Frenzy Charge on hit. And once we have that, we can get our Poacher's Mark, or since we're no longer getting precise technique, we can actually just go straight into Assassin's Mark on hit if you'd like. It doesn't matter too much, but basically, but yeah, you'll definitely want to consider that. Our crit chance won't be super high at this point regardless, but it is nice. And then we have multi-strike, Trinity, and added cold. As soon as you do have your frenzy charges though, you'll simply replace added cold with Ice Bite. And since we're getting that a little bit earlier, I'll go ahead and just add that here, and that gives us a lot higher damage. So as you can see, as we're making these changes, we're getting bigger increases in damage. You definitely want your mana mastery with reservation efficiency at this point as well. So the new setup will look like this, and we now have the accuracy mastery, still keeping our precision at level 1. I keep hatred in here because the reason is just to remind you that we're taking wrath over hatred, and I have it unchecked, so it's not enabled. But also it is possible if you have an early heat shiver that you might still, and like Tessalio's sign and just a ton of cold damage, you may want to run hatred over wrath still, although it's possible wrath is still better up until you get yoke, because yoke will give you access to shock. And so if you don't have a yoke of suffering yet, you may still want to run wrath, but I keep hatred in here just in case. And everything else is basically kind of up to snuff. We are aiming for lightning damage, so if we look here at our configuration, our max lightning damage is higher. And because lightning damage has such a range, you can stack quite a bit of lightning damage and still proc Trinity, because the lows of lightning damage are much lower and the highs are much higher. So lightning damage is very easy to keep Trinity proccing with. So that's kind of our setup we have now. And then I have 50 Trinity resonance count, and I don't think there are any other major changes here, except you also are probably shocking now, which adds, as you can see, a very considerable, like very, very considerable amount of damage. So that won't save it regardless as I save it in, but that's okay. And the notes I have for here are, yeah, basically we don't really go for precise technique anymore. Yeah, just kind of reiterate that we keep using the lightning damage and wrath at this point. Precision still at level 1, start to get wrath up to a higher level here. We now have Assassin's Mark. The main differences are going to be the tree. So at this stage, we're looking for like starting to get the masteries, so that as soon as we get polymath, it'll be impactful. We have a lot of masteries going into here. We have the reservation. We can now take the instant leech. Now we'd be like roughly level 68 at the end of the campaign, give or take, with all of our points. So yeah, we go down, get like forces of nature. We got the leech mastery. We got all of our accuracy stuff, all of our frenzy charges, everything like that. So we're starting to get towards the stage where we're ready for maps at this point, give or take. Might want to pick up a little bit more life. You don't need too much life, especially now that we're running Grace, which we weren't able to do before. That's actually the biggest change, and it's something I didn't mention, is that because of this mana mastery, we're able, and because of the accuracy mastery here and not having to run high level precision, we now don't have to run, or don't get to run Grace. Basically we get Grace right from the get-go, and we kind of get to keep it all the way through. That's going to boost our defenses considerably, so very strong here. Now let's get into early mapping, start to get to like white and yellow maps, progressing through. And as far as the changes for that, major change here is that we no longer need Elrion jewelry, and that is because of this life mastery, which skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost. This is not yet indicated in POB since it's the beta version, so it's kind of redded out. It isn't doing anything at the moment. But yeah, basically the way it is set up, and we can actually transition to go through the intelligence, which will help with wrath here. We should have enough points to spec out of these less efficient lower points, and that will get us there and save us a little bit. Yeah, same kind of setup, still running wrath presumably, unless you do have your uniques at this point. If you're in trade league, you could very well have your uniques already set up at this point. Have bone chill on frostblink, which is pretty standard. I have forces of nature in my last tree, but don't have it in this part, so a little bit different. But what you might have instead is you might have not gotten up here yet, and you might have taken Forces of Nature because this is going to be more important for bossing. That is going to be a setup, nothing too fancy here, but now we start to get into the stage where we do transition more towards like Hatred in the previous final version of the build. When we get at this stage of the game, this is when we start getting into like red maps and everything set up there, and we start getting our uniques. So this is going to be the important stuff. So the tree here, as you can see, I've kind of swapped things around a little bit, but for the most part, I think, let me double check, I think everything here is good. Yeah, nothing unnecessary or any bad masteries. You can take the other life mastery if you'd like. But yeah, now we've gotten up to Claws of the Falcon. One thing you can consider, and we've spec'd out of Life Raker, because usually at this point you have a very high attack speed claw, so you don't need as much attack speed. You can keep that in if you'd like, and maybe spec out of like the points up here, Claws of the Falcon, or just not go down to lethality. Lethality is really nice towards that middle end game part because it does give such a high amount of crit strike and crit multi. This works with any projectile attack skill. Frostblades is a projectile attack skill, so it does work. Also, so does multi-shot. Oh, actually, speaking of, I forgot to update this, so we're gonna have to move some points out anyway. We're gonna spec out of this later regardless, so I'm just gonna go ahead and spec out of that and move this here. So I'm kind of updating things a little bit on the fly. But one other thing you could do is you could take another instant leech node, so then you have 20% instant leech. That's actually pretty huge. And we have probably at this stage also spec'd out of helping Alira, and we'll now have power charges, and we will now have we've had our elusive for quite a while at this stage, and Heartstopper's on, and now we have like our yoke and everything, so we can kind of set up everything there. So the previous damage at this stage was like 1 million less than what it is now, so this tree has increased the damage by a pretty considerable amount, I believe. So that is a pretty big deal as well. One thing you also might want to do is take the increase effective non-damaging ailments here, and you know, you can kind of spec out of some other stuff. Also, the cold mastery isn't as necessary anymore. You can kind of just not take this at all if you want. It's still good, but it's not as good as it used to be because you don't get the freeze duration. And the one major thing to note here is I don't believe I've updated this yet, but basically rather than Divine Judgment for your early on anoint, what you're going to want to anoint, this is very important, you're going to want to anoint Winter's Embrace as your early anoint, and then you're going to want to anoint Breath of Rime as your later anoint, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and put Winter's Embrace on here. We'll anoint that, which I guess will lower our damage down a little bit. So we're still getting a nice little damage increase, but we lost like 300k through that. And yeah, I would have to move a couple of additional points around here somewhere, like maybe don't take this and don't take this yet. There, that puts us at level 90. We have pretty much everything set up, and what I have for this is to get our final kind of Uber Lab done. We have Ritual and Delve are also really good for getting the offering to the goddess. I feel like I find my offering to the goddess most often in the other content, especially Ritual and Delve, when I do new league starts, so I thought I would add that. And then I also have added, with the new Wrath and Lightning damage strategy, you can go all the way to tier 16s without any uniques. I have tested this from solo self-found. It's fully doable. You can get all the way up to tier 16s. And doing that and making currency in tier 16s is better than going back to Magic Find low-level maps. So I've added that on as an addendum. But if you're in solo self-found, you're probably still going to want to go back in Magic Find in low-level maps. So I did kind of keep this in and just add the addendum on. And then as far as like the end game goals, nothing's really changed here for the most part. And then we start to get into the final phase, which is the refining stage, which is when we start getting into, fighting pinnacle bosses and everything like that. I haven't updated the leveling uniques or min-max, by the way, because they're not really necessary, and I wanted to get this out as soon as possible. But big changes here in the end game, in the refined stage. So go ahead and move this up to level 95. And yeah, we're probably shocking for more like, a higher percent now. We've got more damage, everything like that. And this is kind of the final end game setup. Big changes here. So let's go into the notes. So you no longer, now for your Lethal Pride, the spot up here is much, much, much better because you're going to be hitting a lot more notables up here. You hit 13. The ability to find a good timeless node with this many notables allocated is going to be much simpler. You'll be able to find one that's within your budget. As you can see, I kind of have a search going here, and the amount of really, really high quality Lethal Pride jewels is absolutely insane. Like, there are so many good ones. Like, you can't possibly beat it. It's really good. So getting a Lethal Pride, and even if you're just in solo self-found and you're just taking whatever Lethal Pride you get statistically with 13 notables to potentially hit, statistically you're very likely to get a very good one within 1 or 2 farmed Lethal Pride. So you're going to be able to get a solid one very quickly with some double damage, maybe some like crit multi, melee damage, all sorts of good stuff. So much, much better there. And then moving on beyond that, Mesa, as far as farming your Circle of Fear from synthesis maps, Mesa is no longer available. I'm going to review which map is going to be best to replace it. So what I would do previously is I would favor Mesa, and I would just like boss rush Mesas. I'd build up like 30 or 40 Mesas and just boss rush them with the notable that increases your chances of getting a synthesized map allocated. And that would allow me to very quickly build up some synthesized maps so I could get a Circle of Fear. My first thought on what to replace Mesa with is Beach. Beach also has it's always in the same spot, so it's very easy to boss rush. It's a pretty short map too, so you should be able to get there. It's not quite as short as Mesa to get to the boss, but City Square is also an option. It has a triple boss and is also very quick to get to. I don't remember if City Square is going to be rotated out, but I know Mesa is being rotated out and Beach is being rotated in. So that's kind of the early getting your Circle of Fear strategy now. And then finally, you no longer need a Hunter or Shaper Influence shield to get the reduced mana reservation mod on your shield in order to get everything in. In fact, now at the end game, when you have some potential accuracy on gear, you can completely drop precision and just put in Defiance Banner. And Defiance Banner is going to give you quite a bit of EHP. So at this point, we're going to have our Fortify on hit and everything set up as well. So yeah, at this stage, as you can see, Defiance Banner, we go from 56k EHP to 61k. It's pretty considerable. Makes it so we're not going to be getting crit by enemies as much. Gives us a lot of armor and evasion. We don't scale too much armor, but it really does give us quite a bit of evasion. Over 3,000, so over 10% evasion right there. Very big. So that's going to be the update and kind of how to run through it. I'll continue to update this and have it in my later builds when I league start update as I think of more things, but this should be good enough to get you league starting. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful league start. Bye.